coming this Black Friday to Kindle and e-readers everywhere, from the author of the Simp Trilogy, Stop Simping, Why Men Don't Need Finance to Get Romance, Manginas, They Look Like Men But They Act Like Ladies, and The Misadventures of Captain Saberhole comes Stop Simping in the Workplace. Learn what mistakes not to make in the workplace with women and protect your job in Stop Simping in the Workplace. Pre-order your copy on e-readers today. Donald Trump is the new president of the United States, and it's all Barack Obama's fault. How is it Barack Obama's fault? Because Hilary Clinton was running on Barack Obama's record. Moreover, she said that she was going to try to preserve Barack Obama's legacy if she were elected president of the United States. Unfortunately, Barack Obama didn't deliver on his promises. And what was his big promise? Delivering hope and change for America. Unfortunately, most Americans, like myself, didn't get much hope, and we didn't get any change under Barack Obama's presidency. Over the last 8 years, all Americans got was apathy, indifference, and excuses from an aloof politician who was completely disconnected from the people he served. The nails were being put in Barack Obama's coffin far as back as spring of 2009. Back in 2009, Barack Obama had the opportunity to sign an unemployment benefits extension before Congress and the Senate decided they were going to go on vacation. And instead of him taking charge in that situation and insisting that the Democratic House and the Democratic Senate, who had the majority, stay and pass that legislation, he did not take charge and take leadership in that situation during one of the worst recessions in American history. Instead, he let the House and the Senate go have their vacation and left the American people to languish for 2 weeks, struggling to make ends meet the best way they could. He pretty much showed in that one situation that the American people weren't a priority for him, just politics as usual. And because he refused to take the lead in that situation, he pretty much set the foundation for what would be a standard for ineffectiveness when it came down to leadership. Because your Barack Obama did not take charge in that situation, he wound up pretty much laying the foundation for his own dysfunctional legacy. When we look at Barack Obama, he did not take action the way FDR did when Congress tried to stonewall him back in the 1940s during the Great Depression. Now, during that time, he wanted to get the New Deal through. And what he did back then when Congress was trying to stonewall him was saying, no one is leaving until we get business done. No one's going on vacation until we get business done. He pretty much set a tone saying he was going to be the leader, he was going to be the authority figure, and as the chief executive officer of the executive branch of the United States, he was in charge. Barack Obama didn't do that. Instead, he just managed the situation and then pretty much set a standard for people walking all over him. He didn't set a boundary or a line in the sand, and he didn't put the needs of the American people first. Instead, he put the needs of congressmen and senators above that of the American people. And then, after that, what he did was he focused on his legacy. In his eyes, his legacy, again, was more important than the needs of the American people. And he really showed that he didn't care about the American people as long as he got his legacy. In his eyes, getting bullet points to put on his resume were more important than the 20 million people who, like myself, who were put out of work during the Great Recession of 2008. And he was more focused on his Affordable Care Act and pushing it through rather than taking care of all those unemployed people who had been laid off their jobs and were being totally mistreated by employers who were going out and taking actions and saying things like, you need to be employed in order to get a new job. He did not take any action to help those working class people outside of a 2-year unemployment package that pretty much ran out for 20 million Americans and left them hanging at the end of 2010, looking to struggle to make ends meet. And because he did that, again, he put the American people last, and he put his legacy first. And in spite of listening to all the experts who were telling him that his Affordable Care Act was flawed, as far back as 2009, your Barack Obama continued to insist on pushing for his legacy. And yes, he got his Affordable Care Act passed, but then he passed right by the American people in that quest to push his legacy. And then we look at your Hillary Clinton. and the things she did as Secretary of State. Now, your Hillary Clinton as Secretary of State, yes, she made a lot of diplomatic endeavors, but her eye was not on the ball when it came down to foreign terrorist organizations. Because when we look at that whole Middle East situation, it was completely mismanaged by your Hillary Clinton and your Barack Obama. They didn't understand how terrorism works. Now, your Islamic terrorists work like this primarily. They work like a hydra, and just as you cut off one head, two more grow in its place. And this is what your Barack Obama didn't understand because he was a political novice. And this is what your Hillary Clinton just didn't understand because, as I believe, she just didn't care. And when you're dealing with Islamic terrorism, it has to be contained because, like a hydra, if you cut off one head, another will grow. Anybody who has studied global studies or just did research on international terrorism for 40 years will tell you this when it comes down to Islamic terrorism. I mean, we look at the PLO, we look at Hezbollah, we look at Al Qaeda. The minute you destroy one organization, another organization grows up. And after Barack Obama went out and said, oh, he killed bin Laden, he sat there gloating, thinking that it was over, not understanding that your Al Qaeda in Iraq was starting to form into ISIL and become yet another terrorist organization, another head on the Hydra. And because he wasn't paying attention to the head on the Hydra, it wound up growing and expanding all over the world because his Secretary of State was more focused on trying to push regime change and trying to push democracy in countries that weren't ready for democracy, and not focused on trying to contain these Islamic terrorists and trying to dismantle their hydra so that it wouldn't grow more heads. And because he did that, ISIL wound up growing up in over 20 some odd countries, and this is what really messed up the whole Middle East, and it's wholly destabilized the Middle East, leading to the chaos and havoc we have going on right now. And we look at that, and this is, again, part of the legacy your Hillary Clinton said she wanted to run on. She was going to run on her foreign policy record, which we see was a complete shambles. She was running on Barack Obama's domestic policy, which was a complete disaster with his inability to put the needs of the American people first, and his focus constantly on his legacy and getting bullet points on his resume, such as, Obamacare being passed, where many Americans like myself who've been out of work for 8 years and going, all we have to show for it is one of these Obama phones because we can't afford health care to pay for ourselves. We can't get jobs and pay for decent health care, so we have to get on Medicaid and get that type of health care. And all he has to do, and the whole thing is he's talking about he killed bin Laden, but Al Qaeda is partially gone, but now we have ISIL because he was a novice when it came down to understanding domestic policy, foreign policy, diplomacy, and just plain the basics of running a country. His leadership was completely inept, and then you had Hillary Clinton saying she was going to try to preserve the legacy of an inept politician. And when we look at your Barack Obama, his ineptness and incompetence pretty much heavily shows when it relates to the black community. Now, when the black community was talking about all these shootings, starting with the one with Trayvon Martin, your Barack Obama's response was complete indifference. When Trayvon Martin was murdered by George Zimmerman, what Barack Obama did was he made a little weak statement and said, in one case, he said that Trayvon Martin was just like his son. And I think about that statement, and it showed how disingenuous your Barack Obama was. He's sitting there saying Trayvon Martin would be just like his son, and then he pretty much doesn't take any action against George Zimmerman once the jury in Florida acquits him of the murder of Trayvon Martin. Instead, if this was his son, you would think that this man would direct his attorney general to go looking into getting civil rights charges charged against your George Zimmerman. Unfortunately, what your attorney general did was he didn't pass any charges, and then after Michael Brown got killed, what your attorney general did again was he didn't pass for any charges or press for any charges. And then when black people started demanding that he do something, your first black attorney general, Eric Holder, decided to resign. And your Barack Obama was pretty much cool with that. He did not take a leadership role in that situation, and he allowed race relations in the black community and with other races to escalate. He allowed it to deteriorate, and he allowed this racial situation to escalate. And with each passing black man who was killed after Trayvon Martin and Michael Brown, such as Eric Garner, Freddie Gray, Alton Sterling, Philando Castile, Keith Scott, your Barack Obama just sat there and he made a little pretty speech, but he never took any constructive action. Many of these cities were burning. Many of these cities were having riots going on. And the response from Washington, from your first black president, in these situations where black men were being shot and killed by police, was complete apathy and indifference. He did absolutely nothing while cities like Baltimore burned and while areas like Ferguson burned. He was just completely passive and showing us, again, a consistent pattern of weak and ineffective leadership. And this was the platform that your Hillary Clinton said she was going to try to preserve. This was the legacy she was going to try to preserve. And this was the platform she said she was trying to continue. So when Americans look at that platform where they're not getting their economic needs met, they're not being put first by their own government, and they're looking at the foreign policy, which is completely fallen off a cliff, they're saying to themselves, you know, enough is enough. Because we gave you 8 years, we gave Barack Obama 8 years, why would we want to give Hillary Clinton 4 more years to continue doing what has already failed? The definition of insanity is doing the exact same thing and expecting a different result. And a lot of Americans pretty much said to themselves, electing Hillary Clinton would be completely insane, because if she's going to preserve the legacy of Barack Obama and continue the policies of Barack Obama, which are guaranteed failures, then how does that benefit me? This man promised me hope and change, and he did not deliver hope nor change. And most Americans pretty much are in the exact same position they were in back in 2008 when the Great Recession is going on. Yes, a lot of people are saying the economy is doing well, but a lot of Americans like myself are not seeing it. In 8 years, I still do not have a full-time job, and I'm still looking for a full-time job. Many other Americans who have less education than I have, like who have just high school diplomas, one of the reasons why they went to Trump is because they still are looking for full-time work. They still are struggling to make ends meet, and they're not seeing a government that is focused on meeting their needs. And when you look at Barack Obama's record from the spring of 2009, when he refused to sign that unemployment benefits extension and refused to make Congress stay to get that work done, it showed us that he was not focused on leading the American people or setting a course and a direction for the American public. He pretty much put the needs of the American people last, and that's what we saw with Hillary Clinton. She was getting ready to put the needs of the American people last. She was more focused on the bullet point of her resume of being the first woman president, just like Barack Obama was focused on being the first black president, and not focused on we the people who pretty much are supposed to be the priority of the president of the United States. The president is supposed to serve the people, not supposed to serve themselves. And when we look at Barack Obama's legacy, he was pretty much serving himself, looking for bullet points to put on his resume, not focused on meeting the needs of we the people. And when we look at Hillary Clinton, who's running on the exact same platform as Barack Obama, she pretty much was focused again on her own selfish needs of being the first woman president, not focused on the needs of we the people. And this is the reason why her campaign pretty much failed, and this is why she lost, because they weren't focused on meeting the needs of we the people. Americans have been saying they need jobs in the economy to be the priority, and unfortunately, over the last 8 years, Barack Obama has not been listening. Neither has Hillary Clinton, and if she had just taken a minute to actually listen to the American people, who had been telling her for years that jobs in the economy are the priority, maybe she would have had a chance of actually winning this election. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.